slipped on loose gravel, and twice he caught himself before disaster struck. By the time he reached the top, sweat drenched his back despite the cold wind. He carried her to his truck and sped toward the nearest medical center 2 towns away. Doctors rushed Elena into emergency care, stabilizing her and monitoring her unborn child. Miraculously, despite multiple fractures and severe bruising, both Elena and her baby had survived. Ethan stayed in the waiting room, refusing to leave even when nurses suggested he go home. When Elena finally woke, she found him sitting quietly by the window, his hands folded, exhaustion etched on his face. She thanked him with tears in her eyes, telling him he had saved not just her life but her daughter's as well. Ethan brushed it off, saying he had only done what anyone should do, but they both knew that wasn't true. Most people would have walked away from such a dangerous rescue. Elena learned that Ethan wasn't just a mountaineer, he was a former search and rescue specialist who had left the force after losing his own fiancée in a tragic climbing accident. Her death had broken him, and he had sworn never to get attached to anyone again. But seeing Elena fighting for her child had stirred something deep inside him, something he thought had died years ago. While Elena recovered, Victoria celebrated. She had already returned to the city, convinced her problem was gone forever. She visited James, feigning sympathy and tears, telling him Elena had left him for good. James, overwhelmed with work and manipulated by Victoria's lies, believed her. Days passed, and gossip spread. Victoria began positioning herself publicly as James's future wife, attending his meetings, flaunting her presence beside him. But everything began to unravel the moment Elena walked back into the city. She was bruised, moving slowly, but she carried herself with a strength she had never known she possessed. Ethan drove her home, refusing to let her face anything alone. When she stepped into the lobby of Hayes Holdings, employees gasped, whispering in shock. News traveled fast. By the time Elena stepped off the elevator and walked into her husband's office, James stood frozen, staring at her as if he'd seen a ghost. His voice broke as he rushed toward her, asking what had happened. Victoria turned pale, her hands shaking. Elena didn't need to say anything at first. The bruises spoke for her. James demanded answers, his voice cold, and Elena told the entire truth, how Victoria had lured her to the mountains, the argument, the push, the fall. Victoria tried to deny everything, but security footage from the Mountain Lodge parking lot showed her car right behind Elena's, with timestamps matching Elena's disappearance. Ethan stepped forward, adding his eyewitness account of where and how he found Elena. Lawyers were called. Police arrived. Within an hour, Victoria was exposed, cornered, and arrested. Her screams echoed through the hallway as she was. The wind howled across the jagged cliffs of Redwood Valley, a breathtaking but dangerous stretch of mountains in Northern California. Elena Hayes stood near the edge, her hands protectively resting over her pregnant belly. She had come searching for her husband after he hadn't returned her calls for 2 days. Her heart was already uneasy, but she had never imagined the nightmare waiting for her at the top of the ridge. Behind her, a pair of expensive heels crunched over gravel. Victoria Langford, tall, glamorous, and ice-cold, approached her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She had been James's mistress for nearly a year, hidden carefully from Elena, until today. Elena turned around, confused, a tremor in her voice as she asked what she was doing here. Victoria stepped closer, her perfume sharp in the cold mountain air, and told Elena that James had moved on. He didn't want a wife slowing him down, especially not a pregnant one. Elena shook her head, refusing to believe it. She tried to walk away, but Victoria's hand shot out, grabbing her arm with surprising strength. Words were exchanged, sharp and painful, floating into the wind before vanishing between the cliffs. Elena tried to pull free, but Victoria pushed harder, driven by jealousy and a twisted sense of victory. And then, in a single shocking moment, the ground vanished beneath Elena's feet. Victoria shoved her off the cliff. Elena's scream tore through the valley as she plummeted, her hands instinctively shielding her stomach. The world blurred into a swirl of rock and sky before her body crashed against a ledge far below. Pain exploded through her, but somehow she was still conscious, still breathing, still alive. Above her, Victoria stared in stunned disbelief. She had expected Elena to disappear into the depths. Panic seized the mistress, and she fled, convinced the drop had finished the job. Far below, Elena lay broken and bleeding, fighting to stay awake for the tiny heartbeat inside her. She whispered promises to her unborn daughter, begging her to hold on. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower. Her vision dimmed. And then, footsteps crunched near the ledge. A figure appeared, carrying climbing ropes and gear strapped across his back. Ethan Cross, a seasoned mountaineer who often used this route for solo climbs, almost missed the faint silhouette until he spotted the unnatural shape against the rocks. When he realized it was a woman, pregnant, injured, and barely conscious, his heartbeat raced. Without hesitation, he anchored his ropes, crawled onto the narrow ledge, and checked her pulse. Weak, but there. His voice was gentle as he told her he was there to help. Alina's lips trembled, whispering only one thing, "My baby." Ethan promised she would not lose her child, not today, not while he was there. Carefully, meticulously, he secured her to his harness and began the slow, dangerous ascent back up the cliff, using every ounce of his training to steady them both. Twice he